Today we're going to be talking about elastic audio, and really what we're doing is we're going through this one here: time correction, elastic audio, beat detective, some stuff like that. And it's not just going to be elastic audio, one leg at a time, AJ, one leg at a time. It's not just going to be elastic audio. We're also going to be talking about TCE, the time compression expansion tool, and just kind of timing with audio in general. This is not to be confused with timing with MIDI. Some of these techniques we're going to use, you can actually use with MIDI clips as well. But MIDI, the way you do timing with MIDI is not a very different thing, but it allows you a little bit more flexibility with MIDI than with audio. So we're going to be getting into that today. And I've got some samples over here to utilize for this, and they're all kind of rhythmic stuff and some various things to show you. And this is one of the samples that I was thinking about. I needed a vocal sample, so I was looking at this one here, which is okay, but I kind of decided
all over the world.
I decided to go with that one there because it's got a couple longer notes in it, and I want to show you some really cool things that you can do with vocal lines and elastic audio or the TCE tool and stuff like that. Some other samples we've got are some hi-hat stuff, some kick and snare stuff, some cowbell, although there's not really enough cowbell in this one. Got some keyboard lines, and some like percussion stuff, and then like a crash type of sound and a cymbal smash type of sound, because I want to show you some cool stuff you can do with those as well. So that's what we're kind of going to be messing around with today and showing you some different things you can do with all of these. So the first things first, in Pro Tools, when you make a new track, you may have noticed this and you may have been thinking like, what is this? Well, when you make a new track, you have two ways, two time bases that you can make the track in. One is called samples and one is called ticks. And let me just show you an example of this. If I pull up a new track here, and you can see here, let's just see. I feel like there's a piece of fuzzy thing here on the edge of my vision. It's gonna, oh, there we go, I think I got it, yep. So here in my screen here, you can see an audio track is in samples mode. And here, this is my Timebase Selector here, and I can choose between samples and ticks. An audio track is in samples mode, and if I go down here to a MIDI track, it's in ticks mode. MIDI or instrument, these are both in ticks mode. So any kind of audio track or aux track, although with an aux track it doesn't really matter because you're not recording anything onto an aux track. But with an audio track where you are recording stuff, the default is samples, but you can change it to ticks. The samples is the default and you can change it to ticks, whereas with an instrument track, the default is ticks, but you can change it to samples. Now this is something that is unique to Pro Tools. There's nothing like this in Logic or Ableton Live, although once you start to understand what this stuff does, you can kind of force it into Ableton Live. I don't really know about Logic so much. I don't know if it's something you can force into Logic or not. I haven't really ever tried it, but you can definitely force it into Ableton Live, although it does work a bit differently. So on the tracks, if I make a track, let me go ahead and throw in a drum loop over here. Let's get this one here. I'm gonna throw this one in, boop, like that. We're gonna move that over here like this. There we go. And so that's on the one track there. And we're gonna go and put in this percussion line here. All this stuff is it's all 120. Oh, that's smart of me. Good job, me. Everything's at 120. All right, so I have this one here. Now, if I look over here on the left-hand side, each track that you make has this little thing here, this little Timebase Selector here. And you can click on it, and you can change what it is, samples or ticks. So even if you make a new track, let's say I make a MIDI track, instrument track. The instrument track down here is in, it's in ticks mode, right down here. And then we have the samples mode up here. What is up, Proximal? And we could change this for either one of them, even though the default setting is to create it in one or the other, samples or ticks. But once you've got the track into your session, you can change that. And really what this has to do is, it has to do with if the track follows the tempo of the song or if it follows the minutes and seconds of the song. What we call absolute timing or relative timing. Absolute timing is the bars, it's the minutes and seconds, and relative timing is the tempo, the bars and the beats, the BPM, right? So that's what right here in the notes. Ticks is relative timing. The track timing follows the tempo, and samples, which is absolute timing, the track timing follows the clock, not the BPM. Basically what this means is that if you have something that's in ticks Timebase, if you have a track that's in ticks, if you change the tempo, it's going to follow that new tempo. If you have something that's in samples, if you change the tempo, it's not going to follow that tempo. It just stays with itself. So let's just take a look and see that. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to get over here my instrument one. We're going to call this one drum loop. Here we'll call it drum beat, like that. And I'm going to put in here, let's go ahead and put in here the, do I have boom? I do not have boom. Okay, let's use battery. Hold on, actually, before I do it, I have to turn on my hard drive. Do I? Yes. All my samples are on this other hard drive, so I have to make sure that hard drive is turned on. I got my Oliver hard drive for like loops and stuff, but if I want to make some MIDI beats, I have to get John Holmes. There we go. And in here, got my instrument and battery. So I'm going to load up battery here. And battery, in case you don't know, battery is like a drum library. Oh, this is going to take forever. Never mind. We're not turning on. We'll use something else. I'll go into Contact, and I'll use Contact instead. I'll get some drums out of Contact because that has to. I don't use battery ever, so it's having to scan the whole library, which would take forever, ever. Yes, forever, ever. All right. So what we'll do here is let's get the 70s drummer, and we'll get a tight kit here. Tight kit light, so we're not loading up for hours. There we go. I'm going to put it into grid mode, and I'm going to get my grid here to be, let's get a 16th note grid going on. Put it like this. All right, so I got that there, and I'm just going to go ahead and all right, so I got this here. Let's put this in. All right, so we got that. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna record a little loop into here, and let's just do like right there. Hit record. Cool, so we got that there, and I'm going to go ahead and quantize this just so it sounds pretty good. Quantizing it is when you lock in things into the rhythm, into the grid, so it's going to sound more on. It does sound a little bit robot-y, but I'm actually okay with that for right now. We'll go ahead and let's use a groove here. Let's use a 56/16th groove, boom, like that. Cool. All right, so that sounds pretty good. There's a couple little mistakes in here. I'm just going to go ahead, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and fix these real quick. So I'm just going to double click it. When I double click, it pulls this in here. Make sure that my grid is set for 16th notes here. Boom. And I'm going to go ahead and like that. I'm going to turn all these up all the way. So they just, okay. Boom. Okay. All right, cool. Let's take this one. Let's mute this one. All All right, cool. I like that. So we're going to just take that and use that little loop there. And what I'm going to do just real quick is show you what happens when you put something into ticks time mode versus samples time mode. So now I've got this drum loop here. Let me just go ahead and mute this one here. Right, so we got that there, and we got this one here. So we got those two there. Now, if I slow this down, if I go ahead and say my tempo is 120, and that's okay, but it's a little bit too fast. Let's slow it down to 110. Watch carefully what's going to happen. Now, what I want you to pay attention to is over here on the left-hand side. Let me just let that siren go by. All right. So over here on the left-hand side, my MIDI track here is in ticks Timebase. And then my audio track here is in samples Timebase. And what's going to happen is when I slow this down, my MIDI track is going to actually slow down. Go bye-bye. And then my audio track here is going to stay the same tempo. Check this out. So I'm going to slow it down to 100 BPMs. Boom. And you see what happened here. This one stayed the same tempo, but this one slowed down. And check this out. We can hear it. I'm going to go ahead and this. Right? If we listen to that one, that's the new tempo. This one is the old tempo. If I play them together, it's going to be a train wreck. Right? Doesn't work at all, okay? So yeah, it's a big difference in the feel and the groove, and this is really important about the feel and the groove, but this is how Pro Tools works. Pro Tools, with audio tracks, they're automatically samples mode, and so they're not gonna follow your tempo by default. And the MIDI tracks will follow your tempo by default. So if I wanna change my tempo of an audio track, here's what I have to do. We have to actually go over here and we have to do two things. And this is kind of illustrated here in these drawings. If you kind of want to look at this, if I have it at 120 and I slow it down to 60, everything kind of goes in halftime. If it's in ticks mode, if it's in samples mode, it stays the same. Now, if you're making beats in Pro Tools, you really want to use ticks on all tracks. And if you're doing things like sound effects and stuff, you really want to use samples. There are some things you can set it up so your tracks always come up in ticks mode. We'll go over that a little bit later. But audio tracks, if you want your audio tracks to follow your tempo, there's a couple things you have to set up. One is you have to turn on elastic audio, and you have to make sure the time-based mode is ticks. So the way we do that is we just go over here, and to turn on elastic audio onto a track, we're just going to click on this little thing here. It's like, you can see this kind of like weird box here. Well, this is for our elastic audio plugin. Pro Tools calls it a plugin that you put onto it. I find that kind of strange just because I've been using Ableton Live for so long. Ableton Live doesn't look at it as like a plugin type of thing. And the way they approach this is very differently, but it kind of ends up being same-ish. In Pro Tools, it's on the whole entire track. So now if I change this into, let's put it into rhythmic mode here, and anything that I put on this track now is going to be in elastic audio. If I put a different sample or a different audio file onto this, it's going to be in elastic audio mode. So that's the first thing we have to do. We have to put the track into elastic audio, put the elastic audio plugin on the track. Second thing we have to do is change it to ticks Timebase right here. So I'm going to change this. Now watch what happens. Right now I'm going to play it again real quick so they're both at the same tempo. This is the original tempo. No change, no difference. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change my tempo here, and just in case you didn't know how to change a tempo, it's right here. Double click on this little diamond thing, the little red thing here, and just change your tempo. Let's change it to 100. Now you see that my audio stretched out the same as my MIDI clip here. This original audio up top here did not stretch out because I haven't changed this one. If we just look at the differences in these, this track up here is still in samples Timebase. This one here is now in ticks, and it's also in elastic audio turned on. So if we look at these, this top one did not change. This one down here did change. So let's just take a listen to that now. Right? And to me, I think that sounds a lot cooler than it did before. 120 was way too fast for like a drum beat like I played. 120 is more like house music and stuff, not like funky type of stuff. All right, so we've got that. Now, if I wanted to, let me just show you one more thing here. Let me pull this tempo back to its original tempo. I just hit Command Z to undo that. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to this top one, and I'm going to show you what happens. What if I put the time base into ticks, but I don't put on my elastic audio? Well, watch what happens. Let's change it to 100 here. 100. Boop. See, it still stayed the same as what it was before. And the reason why it did that was because your time base affects each clip, but it doesn't affect what's inside of the clip. And that's kind of a concept that you have to wrap your head around. Crispy says it's got some good negative space to fill with some groove now. I'm so glad you said that, man. That's super cool that you just said that, because a lot of times one of the kind of concepts that I try to get across to students is this idea of negative space, of the silence, the space between the notes, which a lot of people don't really pay enough attention to. So I'm really glad that you said that. You just made me very happy, Crispy. Yay. And we'll come back and talk about that. Now it's not the right time to talk about that, but that's awesome that you said that, because it's something that a lot of people don't pay attention to, myself included when I got started. So here we are at 100. Now, if I go ahead and 120, let's go ahead and play all this stuff together. All right, they don't sound too bad together, actually. Let me just turn the level down on this one here a little bit. Cool. Okay. Now, one more time, if I change my tempo right now to 100, you're going to see this kick drum. If I hit play, right, garbage. The reason why, again, is because I didn't change everything over here. If I want my drum up here to be 100, if I want this kick drum loop to be 100, not only do I have to put it in ticks mode, but I also have to set it for elastic audio. So I'm just going to go here and set this for elastic audio. Now, if we put this into 100, now it all changes. All right, there's still something weird happening down here, and what that is this one, Rhythmic Mode is okay for this, but there's one little part in there that's not really happy with Rhythmic Mode, so I'm going to change it to Polyphonic Mode. Okay, that's a little bit better. What I'm hearing is this one right here. Zach says, how do you allow the pitch to lower as well? Okay, so if you wanted, that's a great question. I'm going to actually come back to that, because I'm going to answer your question in just a little bit with one of the modes. Basically, the quick answer, real quick, is you got to change this to vary speed right here. But we're going to talk about all that. That's like how you change the pitch and stuff like that, because that's a really big part of it, but one step at a time. That's a great question, though. I'm probably going to answer it later on, but if I don't, please ask it again. So that's what we've got going on here. We've got these here, and what you've noticed that I've changed is, yeah, more of a pulse. Exactly. It's this part right here was a little bit off with the rhythmic mode because of what's going on with our analysis. Yeah. So maybe what I want to do is actually move that to here, and then in here. Now, what you're seeing is like, wait, what's going on? What's Tony doing? Don't worry, I will explain to you what I'm doing with all this stuff. But there we go. Let's try that. Let's see what that sounds like. Yeah. Yeah, that's even better. And I'm going to explain to you what I just did there in just a second, but we got to kind of get there first. All right, so we have this stuff going on. Let's just review this real quick, this trick, the Timebase Selector. So your Timebase Selector is on the left-hand side of each track. When you make a track, it has a default Timebase selection, default Timebase. I think that in general, you're probably fine to use the default, but it kind of depends on what you're doing with Pro Tools. And this is one of the things with Pro Tools is that if you are using Pro Tools to do movie stuff, editing samples, doing ADR, which is dialogue replacement, stuff like that, you're really only using the samples part of things anyway. You're really just using audio tracks and stuff like that. You're not really using much MIDI. You're not producing with Pro Tools. You're not kind of making your beats. So if you are doing like mixing, if you're doing recording, if you're doing like movie stuff, you're not really going to use TCE Timebase very much at all. But if you're making beats, if you're using Pro Tools to produce with, then you are going to be using TCE Timebase a lot. And it's really important to kind of know the difference between these, because you might be using, when you're producing, you may be using both samples and ticks, really depending on what you're doing with it. So really, depending on what you're going to do with Pro Tools, you kind of need to pay attention to this or not. So one more time, the TCE Timebase is your track timing follows the tempo. It's relative timing. It's not absolute. Absolute is the samples where it follows the clock, not the BPM. If you're making beats in Pro Tools, use ticks on all tracks. If you're doing ADR and Foley or voiceover work, recording, stuff like that, probably use samples. Now, a couple of settings, if you are going to use Pro Tools for music production, a couple of settings that I really recommend that you change on your Pro Tools setup is in your preferences, and it's how the processing works. So if we go in here to Pro Tools, I go to my setup, I go to preferences here, and we're going to go into processing, and over here where it says elastic audio, we're going to change this here so it says enable elastic audio on new tracks. By default, that's off. What this is going to do is every track you make, it's going to put elastic audio on it automatically. And this is going to make it more like Ableton Live. It's actually kind of bringing Pro Tools more into an Ableton Live type of workflow, where as soon as you drag a sample onto it, it's going to go ahead, as soon as you drag audio onto it, it's going to go ahead and change it into elastic audio so you can manipulate the time. If you are not doing beats in Pro Tools, I really don't recommend turning this on. I recommend turning it off. Also, your default plugin, if you're doing a lot of beat loops and like house music or pop music production, I really recommend actually that you just use Rhythmic Mode. Now, don't keep it in polyphonic mode, keep it in Rhythmic Mode, and we're going to talk about the different modes in a minute, and you'll kind of understand why. But for now, if you're kind of following along with me, then I recommend putting this into Rhythmic Mode here. The other one you want to change is down here under Menu, Setup Preferences, Editing. Take the tracks and make it so new tracks default to TCE Timebase. So that's under here, same place, we just go to Editing here, and down here where it says Tracks, new tracks default to TCE Timebase. So this one here is the important one if you are making beats in Pro Tools. I'm going to hit OK right here, boom. And so now any new track that I put into this session, it's going to automatically be in TCE Timebase, and it's automatically going to be in Rhythmic Elastic Audio mode. So check this out. If I pull in this percussion here, I'm going to pull in the percussion right here, boom, drag it in down there, and it automatically did those things. Oh, except it didn't. Wait, what? That's interesting. I guess if I drag a sample directly onto it, it's not going to put it in TCE Time mode. Did I not do something correctly here? Hold on a second. That was strange. New tracks default to TCE Timebase. Yeah? So if I make a new audio track, well, this is in TCE, but if I drag one on, I've never really noticed this before. Interesting. If I drag a sample in here, let's drag in this keyboard. Yeah, it's in samples mode. Wow, okay, interesting. I've never really noticed that before. So I'd have to change this to ticks with any kind of thing I drag in here. That's a weird little thing. I've never noticed that before. So with this one here, it's in rhythmic mode. But if we play it, let me just go ahead and here, let's just play this with my drum loop. We're not going to play everything here. I just want to show you, it's still going to sound weird. Check this out. Oh wait, that's that one. Hold on, we don't want that one. Let's get the cowbell one. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. That's the one we want. Turn it down a little bit. Right? Here, that does not sound right at all. That's not the right thing. Because even though I dragged it in here, I still have to do some stuff with my sample to make it work. Now, this is a really big difference between Pro Tools and Ableton Live. With Ableton Live, when you drag a loop into a session, if it's a proper loop, it's going to automatically fit into the tempo. And this is something that's really awesome. And this is why most people who are making beats, who are like doing a lot of production with loops and stuff, a lot of people use Ableton Live. I mean, just a lot. A lot of people have been converting to Ableton Live because of how it works with loops and stuff like that. So with Pro Tools, you can do it and you can make it work, but there's a little bit of extra work that you have to do in order to make it work. So I'm gonna show you how to fix this in just a bit, but for now, let's just kind of leave it at that there. Okay, so let's see here. What does it say? Audio tracks. Audio inside of a clip doesn't change unless the audio elastic audio is enabled and the track is in TIX mode. Remember, those two things are super, super important. If an audio track is in TIX mode, but elastic audio is not enabled, the clip start and end points will not shift according to the tempo. So if you have it in TIX mode and you don't have elastic audio on, it's not going to change anything. Vice versa, if you have it in elastic audio mode, but you don't have it in TIX mode, if it's in samples mode, it's not going to change anything. So both those things have to be set correctly. All right. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn off my elastic audio on these two tracks here. I'll keep them in TIX mode because whatever, it doesn't really matter so much if it's in TIX right now for what I'm going to show you next. What I want to talk about here is the TCE tool. Can anybody tell me what TCE stands for? This one right here. Go ahead and tell me, what does that TCE stand for there? Waiting for that Twitch lag. Time compression expansion. You say expander, yeah. Expansion. Time compression expansion. You were like 98% of the way there. Yep. Time compression expansion. That's what TCE stands for. All right. And this is what I would call the old school elastic audio. Okay. So just so we know what's going on here, elastic audio is basically allowing me to mess with the timing of my audio file without messing with the pitch of my audio file. And the TCE tool was kind of the first way to do that. It's up here under our trim tool. So here's our trim tool. Let me just show you the trim tool real quick. If I use my trim tool, I can grab this here. Let me solo this track so we can hear it. Right? If I grab it with the trim tool and I pull it back like this, right? If I move it like this, right? So it's just adjusting the edges of my clip right here. All right, let me go ahead and I'm going to put these and make these all small. I'm going to make this one nice and big so we can see what we're doing a little bit better. Okay, so that's what the regular trim tool does. Remember, that's the trim tool. And remember, we have this other one here, the loop tool here, which we talked about yesterday. The loop tool, it just makes loops of it. Right, it's just making a loop of it. But this third tool here, which we did not speak about yesterday, is the TCE tool. And this one has a little clock on it. Now, the TCE tool, what it does is it allows me to adjust the timing of the clip as a whole, the overall clip. Check this out. Basically, it's going to make the clip shorter or longer. And with a rhythmic clip like this, that's going to change the timing of the clip. So if I go ahead and make this shorter, watch what happens. Boop. Hear how that worked? I hit Command Z to undo. Let me drag it this way. Right? And it made it slower. Now, you also hear what happened was it just put a lot of artifacts in there, really weird artifacts. And so we got to be careful with TCE. It changes the sound of it because you're actually manipulating the audio itself. One other thing that I just want to point out to you with TCE is that when I change it, it actually makes a new audio file on my computer. So halftime at FL, I actually don't know anything about FL Studio. I've never actually used FL Studio, but it's probably, I have a plugin called Halftime or Half something, and it just based on the name, it's probably something similar to that, yeah. So what this does is it allows you to adjust the tempo of, basically you're stretching or compressing the overall clip. Time, compression, expansion. Compressing, expanding, making it longer or shorter. And essentially, if it's a rhythmic clip, it's going to make it faster or slower. If it's a cymbal smash, and that's why I put this in here, so we can check out the cymbal smashes. If I had the cymbal smash here, right, if I want that to be faster, so it doesn't hold as long, I can just use my TCE tool, right, to do that with it. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn off my elastic audio here, and I want to show you something. If we look over here, here's my audio file, the UFX Crash Bando. If I take this and use my TCE tool on it, see what it does? It just made a new audio file in here called Crash Bando -Timeshift 01. The time shift is the plugin that it's using to make this change. And essentially what it's doing is it's using an audio suite plugin to change the speed of my cymbal smash. See how it's shorter than it used to be? If I hit undo, this is what it sounded like originally. Nice and long. If I take this and shorten it up, right, there we go. I just made it a lot shorter. So this is great if you want to if you have a cymbal smash and you want to make it smaller, or if you want to make it longer. It's really good for this kind of stuff. All right. Now, you might be listening and going, wow, Tony, that really sounds weird. And I agree with you, it really does sound weird, but we can actually change that so it doesn't sound so weird. Go to Setup, go to Preferences, go to Processing, and in here, change our default settings. So we can have this time shift in here. We have this one here, we got this stuff. I usually keep it on stereo mix default. I find that one is the best for stuff. The Avid TCE, I don't really use that one. I use the stereo mix default. Different ones do different things. They have slightly different sounds to them. Basically, this is changing the math behind it. So that's what we can do there. Hit OK and you're good to go. And Antonio says, Tony, how do I delete tracks? What you do is you right click on a track name and you hit delete. That's what you do. You right click and you select delete to delete a track. Just be careful, you cannot undo a delete. So make sure that that's what you want to do, that you actually want to delete it, but that's how you do it. So if I take this and, oops, yes, I know. Okay, let's take it and stretch it out with this new one here, the stereo mix default. Still sounds weird. Keep in mind, but it sounds a little bit better than it did before, but just keep in mind, if you stretch things, that's a lot more processor intensive on the computer, and it's harder because what it's doing is it's trying to take the waveform and stretch it out like this, so it's actually putting like more pieces of, like, I don't know, bits or whatever in the middle there, and so it's going to make it sound more kind of what I would call robot-y. It sounds like more machine-y. If you have ever watched the movie The Matrix, which probably a few of you have, when they start messing with different, like, the machines are breaking through the fabric of reality or the fabric of the computer simulation or whatever, then they use a lot of these effects, and it sounds like what they did was they just stretched things out a lot in Pro Tools to make it sound this kind of like weird, glitchy sounds, like here. Like if you remember the Matrix, that they have that sound a lot in the Matrix. That kind of like, you can hear the little steps of the audio. It's a cool sound. It doesn't sound natural though. All right. So if I wanted to use this with this one here, right? I want that to sound more natural. Let's go ahead and stretch that out. All right. That doesn't sound great. It sounds meh. Let's see what happens if we use a drums rhythmic here. Stretch it out. That one sounds a lot better. Yeah. Right, so you got to use the right setting for the right material. And that's really important with all this stuff, whether we're talking about TCE Tool or we're talking about Elastic Audio or whatever. And you'll just kind of get a feel for it. You'll have to go in here and change it around. I wish they actually made it a bit easier to get to. Like I said, I usually use Stereo Mix default, but honestly, I don't really use TCE that much anymore. But there are some things that it's good for. And we're going to talk about, once we talk about Elastic Audio and we've kind of got a handle on Elastic Audio, we're going to come back and talk about the TCE Tool a little bit more. Mostly what I use TCE Tool for is things like cymbal smashes, just to make them a little bit longer and stuff like that. But the main thing with TCE Tool is it does make things shorter or longer. It also creates a new audio file on your computer. So let's just go ahead and take a look at the notes here. This tool adjusts the time or length of the clip. It creates a new audio file whenever you use it. It is the old version of Elastic Audio, or Warp or FlexTime, depending on if you're using Logic or Ableton Live. That kind of brings me to an interesting point, is that basically Elastic Audio, in case you didn't know, it's the same thing as warping in Ableton Live, or it's the same thing as FlexTime in Logic. If you are using Logic, then you might be familiar with FlexTime. If you are using Ableton Live, then Warp is whatever. So Antonio, you got to click on the track name, and then right click on it, and then delete will pop up. And if that's not doing it, we have to wait until Zoom to help you with that. Okay, you're just gonna have to keep that track in there, just not delete that track for now. But we'll come back. I can help you, but I gotta keep going with this stuff because I don't know what I have to look at your screen to see what you're doing wrong if it's not popping up. All right, so if I have a clip like this here, if I want to make this clip a little bit longer, then what I can do is I can just take a TCE Tool and just click and drag it over, and it's going to adjust the timing without affecting the pitch. Now, if I have a record and I wanted to make the track go slower, if I slow that record down, it's going to also bring the pitch down, because that's just physics at work. Remember from Mod 1, whenever you take a wave and you make that wave longer, the pitch goes down. So actually that kind of pitch shift effect, if I go la 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 and I slow it down, la 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 la, right? Every time I slow it down, it gets lower in pitch. That sounds like a special effect, but it's actually not a special effect. That's natural audio. That's how audio just works. If you don't want it to do that, then you have to turn to stuff like TCE or Elastic Audio. I would recommend using Elastic Audio most of the time nowadays, but TCE Tool is still a thing, and I highly recommend that you kind of decide which one is better for you for which situation. So the TCE Tool is useful for adjusting the overall tempo of loops, but it is really bad for correcting timing within loops. It is useful for elongating or shortening specific sounds, such as cymbals or explosions. It is essentially an audio suite plugin that you're using as a tool, so therefore when you use it, it creates a new audio file with the TCE tag at the end of the name. So it'll be voc.wave would change to voc-timeshift01.wave. And if you did it again on the same one, it would say 02, 03, like that. You can change the TCE algorithm depending on what type of audio you are working with. So for example, like if you're working with a vocal, a full track with instruments and drums and everything, drums, bass, etc., go to Setup, Preferences, Processing, TCE, and you can change it in there. my recommendation for that is to experiment and try different things. The TCE plugin, my suggested setup within the preferences is Avid Time Shift, Stereo Mix Default. And then some factors that determine how well TCE sounds is which direction you're adjusting the audio. If you're stretching the audio, it's going to sound worse. If you're compressing it, it's going to sound better. Okay. I'm moving a little bit fast because I do want to get into elastic audio here. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the TCE tool. I do want to get into elastic audio, and so there's quite a lot of stuff to cover today. That's why I'm moving so fast. But it's all here in the notes. You can come back, you can read it. We can discuss it after you've read it. You can check it out, think about it a little bit, and then come to me with any questions you might have. But for now, we're kind of moving fast. So which direction you're adjusting the audio? So let's just take a look at that. So I've got my hi-hats here. Okay, let's go ahead and do this, solo this one. If I have this in stereo mix default, which is what I have it in, if I make it shorter, which is going to make it faster, it sounds still pretty good. Here, let me just make it a little bit less. Let's just change this here. That's the original. Right, and let's move it like this. Sounds okay. It's a little bit wobbly with the rhythm. You know, it's like it's doing a few weird things in there, right? If I stretch it this way, it's going to do weird things, but it's going to sound a little bit different. See how the rhythm is still steady, but what it's doing is at the beginning of the notes are getting a little bit weird. Hear how the beginnings of the notes sound a little bit like brr, there's like a little bit of a buzz on them, brr, brr, like that. Well, that's pretty normal. That's what happens when you stretch things out, because what it's doing is it's trying to stretch the waveform out, and it's not really keeping the transient intact. And that's where something like my Rhythmic Mode would be really great. I go in here, I go to Rhythmic, Drums Rhythmic here, and now it should take care of those problems. So if I take it and I make it faster, right, that helps things a lot. If I go this way, it's also going to sound better too. Sounds a lot better. So you can see that what setting I use really makes a difference. The reason why I recommend using the stereo mix default for your basic setting is because a lot of times people are doing this with like full tracks of like from a sample from a song or something like that. But if you are mostly doing it with drum loops, then just keep it on drums rhythmic. It's really up to you. It really depends on what kind of file you're applying it to. So there's that right there. Now, with this here, let's go ahead and play this loop with my drum beat here. You can hear how they don't quite fit together. Now, both of these loops, well, this loop here, this percussion loop, is a 2-bar loop. And I know it's a 2-bar loop because I'm just counting along with it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, right? That's 2 bars. Well, if I look at my session here, I can see that 2 bars is right over here at the end of like where the bar 3 begins. That's the end of my 2 bars. So what I can do is I take this and I use my TCE tool and I just stretch it over here to right there. Boom. Now, of course, that sounds weird because I put it back. Let's just keep it in rhythmic mode for now. There we go. Stretch it over. Boom. Sounds great. Let's play with my drum beat, my drum kick and snare. Sounds awesome, okay? So I'm gonna duplicate that over a couple times. Right, sounds good. Now let's just do that one more time. I'm gonna do it with this keyboard loop here. Again, let me play the keyboard loop by itself. Right? This is originally at 120. How do I know it's at 120? It's because it says 120 in the name of the sample. So if I want this to fit in with everything else, if I play it right now with my drum beat here, They do not fit together. But if I take the TCE tool and I just stretch it over, and you can see up here in the top, I actually have my TCE tool right now as part of my Smart Tool. So if I'm doing a lot of stuff with my like loops and adjusting loops and stuff, I might just change this into part of my Smart Tool here. And I go down here, and I'm gonna just take it. I'm just gonna drag it across over here like this, boop boop, like that, boom. Now let's listen to it. All right, and that sounds pretty good, but I've still got it in rhythmic mode, so that I don't really like it that it's in rhythmic mode. To me, I can hear some artifacts in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and change this back into stereo mix default, and now I'm gonna stretch it over. Hopefully it sounds better. Yeah, it doesn't sound great. Let's try a different one and see what happens. And sometimes you might need to try a couple of different ones to make sure it sounds good. Let's try instrument polyphonic and see what that does. Not great. Try one more before we just stop here. Let's go with piano, because it is an electric piano. That's the instrument we're using here. Yeah, I don't love it. I'm going to use one of the other ones here in a second with elastic audio. And this is a case where you have to listen to it and then decide if you actually want to use it. The cutoff seems a little bit sharp within the track. Yeah, I mean, probably. That's not really, that's just part of the sample, which I can't really change. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. There are some things we can change once we get into elastic audio a little bit, but it kind of depends on how kind of in detail you want to get with this stuff. But you can hear, what I'm hearing is I'm hearing there's like some artifacts in within the sound of the piano. It's like a little bop, 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 bop type of sound. Here's what it sounds like naturally. Right, if I stretch it out. Right, I don't know if y'all can hear that or not, but I hear it. It kind of annoys me. That's what it says when I right click. It says polyphonic, mono, etc. That's because you are right clicking on this part right here. You need to right click on the name of the track right here. All right. So now I forgot where I was. Yeah, so basically the reason why it's sounding like this is because we're stretching it pretty far from here to here. It's actually a pretty far stretch. So we need to, like, if you are only stretching like a little bit, that's gonna work out okay. But I did change the tempo from 120 to 100. That's 20 BPM difference. That's a big difference. So be aware when you are working with elastic audio or TCE or stuff like that, your tempo change, how much you've changed the tempo, does make a difference in how the audio is going to sound. A 100 BPM change is a big deal. Crispy says, can we take a break soon? Yes, we can. Let's see. Let me just get to the end of TCE here. Yep, couple more things to talk about before we get to elastic audio. Is factors that determine how well it sounds, which direction you're adjusting the audio. Stretching sounds worse, compressing sounds fine usually. What kind of audio it is. Separated sounds are easier to deal with than overlapping sounds. The algorithm you choose is important. Experiment, try different things out. Remember, if you make it longer, it's going to be a slower tempo. If you make it shorter, it's going to be a faster tempo. TCE can be used to adjust natural sounds, but it can also be used as a sound effect tool for making crazy sci-fi sounds, as I mentioned about the Matrix stuff. And then TCE tips, use it to extend the ends of words. So for example, if I have my vocal line in here, let's drag this vocal in here. Let's grab this all over the world sample and drag it down here. And I'm going to put this all over the world up here, more up at the top, so we can just kind of see what it's doing. So here's my vocal.
All over the world.
All right, let's say that I want this last bit right here to stretch out a little bit. So what I can do is I can just go in here and cut it right there with my Command E. And I'll just take this and stretch it out. Let's make sure that we've got this in the right. Let's use a female vocal here. Boop, there we go. And just drag it a little bit over, stretch it out, and you can see the waveform changes there as well. Wait hold on a second. Let's change this away from, let's take off elastic audio and then move it over like this. Boop.
All over the world.
Right? And so there we go. I just made it stretch a little bit longer. So here's what it sounded like before.
All over the world.
Right? And I can stretch it out.
All over the world.
Right? There we go. And I could even put like a little fade on it or something like that. Now, if I want to trim this off to get rid of this little stuff in the end here, I have to make sure that I'm not using my TCE tool, that I'm using my regular trim tool, and I can switch back and forth between those using F6, and I would put a little fade on this.
All over the world.
Cool. There we go. Something like that is what I would really do with it in real life there. And we're going to come back and talk about this a little bit more when we talk about elastic audio. One last thing about it is use it to adjust the tempo of a loop to fit the tempo of the song, which is what I just told you about. But make sure you're only going a little bit, not 20 BPMs. Like what I've been showing you is a lot. It's a big change in the tempo and everything. So for example, if I let's put all this back to 120. Let's put it to 115 instead of 1. There we go. 115.
Oh.
So here's this. Let's. Okay. Okay, this one did not change with my tempo because I did not have this. There we go. Boom. 100 BPM. Yep. Cool. 115. There we go. Okay. Now, if I take this and I adjust this, it's not going to be as much of a difference. It's not going to sound bad because, yep, that trim to fade is a great one. But if I go over here and I use my TCE just to this keyboard line here, right? It's a little bit off, but it's not that off. So if I grab it and move it over, wait, hold on, make sure I'm in. There we go. Just a little bit. Right? It doesn't sound as bad as it did before. So just make sure, like, if it's only like 5 BPM difference, you can use the TCE tool for stuff. But if it's more than that, probably I would use elastic audio, just because elastic audio does sound a bit better. All right, which brings us to elastic audio. We're gonna take that up in the after the break. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Be back at well, a little bit over 10 minutes just to even things out. Let's be back at 10:50. All right, cool.